A very warm welcome everyone to the Maritime Education Podcast. My name is Barry Sadler, and today in this new episode I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that exist for pilot boat crews when manoeuvring to service a ship and embark a pilot. Here in Southampton, most of our big ship embarks are done in the vicinity of what's known as the Nab Tower. The Nab Tower is a significant structure 12 miles off of Portsmouth, which was the only remaining tower built as a series of towers designed to hold submarine nets during the Second World War. The idea to string a submarine net right across the English Channel was dropped by the United Kingdom government, but not before two of these towers had been built. One of them was dismantled, the other one was towed out and submerged off Southampton to mark the shallows to the Solent, known as the Nab Bank. The Nab Tower now serves as a lighthouse. It also serves as a significant landmark for the embarkation of pilots in Southampton. Managed to get an interview with a very experienced pilot boat coxswain that operates down in Southampton at the Nab pilot station, and we'll listen to that interview very, very shortly. But I felt it important before we do to explain what the Nab Tower was, because ultimately Paul, who the interview is conducted with, refers to the Nab Tower quite a bit. The Nab Tower marks the entrance to the deep water route and marks the shallows to the west of that deep water route, and so embarking ships in the vicinity of the Nab Tower can create challenges. The main reason for this is that the tower itself is made out of concrete and steel, and if you collide with it, the ship generally comes off second best, as demonstrated by a ship called the Dole America back in 1999, which hit the Nab Tower and ended up sinking on a nearby sandbank. We tried to embark very big deep ships way to the south of the Nab Tower in order to give the ship more room to manoeuvre and enable the vessel to stay on a course for a period of time to allow the pilots to embark. Now, this isn't always possible to do with smaller vessels, because the further south of the Nab Tower you get, generally the higher the seas. So in particular, if we've got high winds, then we may need to bring the ships in closer. I took the opportunity some time ago, just a couple of days ago, to speak to Paul and to ask him his opinion on boarding ships at the Nab Tower, and I thought it worth, particularly those of you serving as master, listening to this and listening to some of the challenges that a launch coxswain has when trying to safely embark a pilot, particularly on a very large ship, in a pilot station that does have its challenges. So let's have a listen to that interview.
So I'm here down in Gosport with Paul Tomlinson, who has been a coxswain down here for how long now, Paul?
27 years.
27 years a coxswain on pilot boats. And we're just strolling down to our pilot boats. I'll shortly be going out to a ship with my colleague Mike in order to bring in a container ship. But Paul and I are here just to talk about some of the issues that we have and risks that we have to deal with when we are boarding ships at the Nab Tower. So Paul, you've been a coxswain for 27 years now. What sort of changes have you seen in the way that ships behave at pilot stations?
Well, the first change would be the fact that we're boarding the ships a lot further out than we used to, mainly because of their size. And so we need to be able to ensure that we've got plenty of room, because the area around the Nab Tower is actually quite constrained, certainly to the west and to the east, using those pilot positions, pilot boarding areas. The tide can set you either onto the Nab Tower or onto the area of the new grounds.
So it's not necessarily the drafts, is it? Really, because we've always had fairly deep drafts here in Southampton, but a lot of it's about the sheer size and manoeuvrability of the ship.
Absolutely, because so the tide and the wind and the weather, determines what heading you're going to need to have the launch on or the ship on to be able to get a lee. And so it's the ability to get a good lee to safely board the Pilot, and that means having to put the ship in a position where they've got a good they can turn back to get back onto the heading that they need, and also to allow enough room for us to safely get the Pilot on the ladder.
So the time it takes for the Pilot literally to climb the ladder and the time it takes for us to get the bag up and things like that, you need there to be plenty of sea room so that we don't end up having to change the course of the ship prematurely and run it into danger, really.
That's right. And the bigger the ship, the less manoeuvrability you've got, the less room you've got to turn the ship.
So when you're out there, particularly when the weather is a little bit snotty, when you're out there, what makes for a good boarding? What sort of things would a captain do that really would assist you as a launch coxswain in getting a Pilot safely onto the ship?
Well, the first thing is to ensure that the Pilot ladder complies with SOLAS 23, and that you are absolutely sure that that's going to happen. The last thing you want to do is get to a ship and find that the Pilot ladder isn't in a good enough condition to use it, because then you don't always have enough time to change the ladder or to change the side of the boarding area, which means you need to take a turn out on the ship, because you need to use the other ladder. So if the ship's got a good Pilot ladder and it is compliant, that's going to be half the battle won, really.
So in Southampton, when we see uncompliant Pilot ladders, we instantly are turning the ship away. We'll never put anybody in danger. We'll always say to the captain, sorry captain, your ladder's not compliant, we're not going to be able to board you today, captain. So no, we turn them around, don't we? Yeah, that's great. That's one thing. What else would a captain do that would really make your life easier?
Well, to be on the heading and in the position that you want them. The last thing you want is to turn up at the Pilot boarding area and find that the ship's already either there too soon, or has already gone past the boarding area, or is still 1 or 2 miles away from the boarding area, because that's going to increase the time you've got, because often you need to get the Pilot onto the ship, and then you've either got an outbound vessel that you need to serve, or there's other vessels around that are going to be like dredgers, for example, that might be in the way. So if the ship's in the right position at the right time, that helps a great deal, certainly. So you don't want them to be like encroaching too close to the NAB tower when you've asked them to be 1.5 miles southeast of the tower, for example, because that's going to reduce the length of time you've got to put the Pilot on the ship, because you need to turn him away, so you're going to lose the lee that you've already asked for.
So just to explain to everybody, when a ship gets too close to the NAB tower, it really does restrict the sea room that it's got in order to be on a course that Paul needs them to be on. So if the captain comes in too fast and finds himself too close to the NAB tower and not at the allotted Pilot boarding station, then Paul's unable to get the ship on the heading that he wants the ship on, and he's unable to get the captain to stay on that heading long enough to safely embark the Pilot, because the ship needs to alter course because it's drifting off into shallower water, or may miss an optimum approach to the channel. So yeah, that's good. What about once the Pilot's on board, Paul? Talk to me a little bit about what you'd like the captain to do once the Pilot's on board, because if the captain starts to bear away too quickly before you've managed to get clear, that can be an issue. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, that's right. We need to get clear from the ship, and we also need to allow the time for the Pilot to get from the Pilot ladder up onto the bridge to do his whatever the Pilot needs to do to be able to start taking control of the navigation. So there's a bit of a gap there. So we need to be able to explain to the ship that we need them to come back to a certain heading, certainly if the Pilot's asked us to do that. And we need the ship to also be aware of the position that he's in and what the tide may be doing. So if the ship's already aware of what the tide's doing and how strong that tide can be, then they should have pre-planned what heading they need to get back onto, what course they're going to need to get into position for them to start commencing their passage.
Also, as well, you don't want the captain to be doing too many dramatic manoeuvres whilst you're still alongside the ship. You need to get clear, don't you? Talk a bit about getting your boat off the side of the ship.
Well, that's right. What you don't want is if you've asked for a particular heading, and obviously the ship then needs to get back onto a certain course, what you don't want him to start coming round onto the heading before you've been able to get the pilot boat away. Otherwise, the boat gets pinned alongside, and it's quite difficult to get off. Certainly, if you've got a tide pushing you back onto it. So, you need them to allow us to get away before they start manoeuvring.
Okay, good. All right, Paul. Well, thank you very much for those insights. 27 years here as a launch coxswain, alongside my 24 years as a pilot. So I've worked with Paul now for over 2 decades, and things have changed here at Southampton, and ships have got bigger, they've got less manoeuvrable, and we've had to adapt as we've gone on. And in order to achieve a safe boarding every time, regardless of the conditions. Today we're stood here on Pilot Launch. Which one are we on?
We're on the Majestic.
We're on the Majestic. We're on the Majestic today. We're still on Majestic today, and conditions are good. The wind is from the northeast. It's only about 15 to 20 knots, so it's a fairly benign day. But we've been out there, you and I, Paul, in sort of 30, 35 knots, and it can get quite bumpy. So captains doing what we ask them to do is really important, and
absolutely.
Listening to what you say, Paul, as well, because at the end of the day, if a captain doesn't do what you ask him to do, that's when things can go south very, very quickly, isn't it?
It certainly is, and captains need to appreciate how small we are in comparison to the size of them. So what may look calm to them up on their bridge high up actually might not be so calm for us, and they've got to appreciate also that it's going to take us a bit longer in inclement weather, in bad weather. We might have to reduce our speed a bit because of the weather, and they need to bear that in mind, the fact that we might not always be able to manage to get to them at the time that they expect us.
So to adjust their speed accordingly, watch you carefully on the AIS, watch what speed you're doing, and adjust their ETA at the pilot station if necessary to account for you struggling through the waves.
Yes, we will always call the ship up and say, look, we're going to be a bit late. We've had to reduce our speed because of the conditions. But invariably, we get there when we should do. If we say we're going to be there, we normally are there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much for your time this afternoon, Paul. Thanks a lot. I'll let you get back to your duties.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.